Is print media in South Africa in trouble? The announcement by media owner Khanyi Dlomo that she would be shutting down various publications under Ndalo Media disappointed a lot of the followers of the flagship magazine Destiny. And prior to that, the PIC also made public its decision to write off 1 billion rands debt to the independent newspapers. And then we're wondering out loud, what is it that might be troubling the print titles at this time? Digital media or the habits of the audiences? And my guests are Thandi Smith of Media Monitoring. Thandi, pleasure to have you with us. And Razia van der Skeer, who is with us from our Cape Town studios. And Razia, good evening to you. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Tim.
Thandi, let's kick it off right away here. What is the media situation in the country in terms of the split between broadcast and print and digital media? What is happening? What is the activity in the media sector?
I think that, you can confidently say that the media sector is definitely on the decrease. I think everyone knows that. It's something that we've seen happening over the last few years. Interestingly enough, though, in South Africa, you still find broadcast media reaching the biggest audience. That's radio and television. SABC being the biggest broadcaster in that. But you also see an increase in digital media and people accessing their news and media online through social media platforms and through mobile devices as well.
So the newspapers as we know them, I mean, it used to be a habit of many households and also part of the culture in the urban areas in particular, where you saw newspaper men, mostly, in the past, crisscrossing between cars and selling newspapers either in the early hours of the morning or in the late afternoons. And we don't see much of that anymore.
No, you don't. And that represents the decline that we're seeing in print publications. Interestingly, as well, though, is that print media is still quite a popular platform when we look at community and local media. So I think people often forget that there's still over 200 local community media that are print publications, and we can get into that around issues around media diversity and what to do around that sector. That people still rely on print or newspapers for their news. But, globally, you're looking at a completely changing media environment, which is going digital. We can't ignore that.
Well, you mentioned something about broadcasting. I suppose the point is that particularly radio is the dominant medium through which people receive their entertainment and information. Is that correct?
Yes, I think it's safe to say that in South Africa especially, that people still rely on radio for their news and entertainment. There are all sorts of arguments around at the moment with what's happening at the SABC around the fact that 28 million people are still relying on the SABC services, such as radio particularly, for their news and entertainment. But again, we can't ignore that, there are a few elements that go into, what we call digital media. And it's not only, thinking of it online or through the internet, it's also about infrastructure. It's about how you're transmitting radio, or how you're transmitting signals, how media is actually working. And that's all moving into digital equipment. And, we are lagging behind in that, I think, as a country.
Well, Razia, let me ask this question and pose it to you. I mean, the new players seem to have adopted technology at a much faster pace than some of the more established media houses. Ndalo Media is relatively new to the scene, but they are now in trouble. What is it that you think is going on with the print media, and why would these media houses not adopt technology like most of the newcomers are around the world?
Yeah, Tim, I think the interesting part is that we're struggling with the fact that consumers are changing. I think because one day they're on WhatsApp and the next day they're on Facebook and then they're buying a magazine, all media around is struggling with the consumer's behavior. So the interesting thing is that print media is struggling to maintain an audience, and digital media is struggling to replicate the business model of the print industry. So So they're kind of doing this with each other, but at the same time, we're all trying to holistically give the audiences exactly what they need.
And of course, we have to remember that we're talking about media. It's a business at the end of the day, right? There are many drivers of the success or otherwise of any title, magazine or newspaper.
Yes.
So what are the key pressures then in that regard?
It is the case, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I say, what would be the key drivers of the costs of a publication?
The biggest cost, obviously, is the printing. It is very, very expensive to print. And then the distribution factor. If you do want to reach a large audience, you'll have to print and distribute across the entire country. So print, the cost factor is that. And digital, obviously, the tech is very expensive to try and build a proper platform to speak to the audiences in the way that you would rather, the proper way. So, yeah, it's pretty much that. Obviously, of course, if you want a good newsroom to do all the journalism, then it's the cost of all the people and the journalists that you have to pay.
But when it comes to digital now, Thandi, you know, it's instant, and also it's very accessible. You don't have to wait for the publisher to distribute the publication to see, and you don't have to wait for month end or for the publication date for a publication, whether it's a magazine or even a newspaper. You don't have to wait for the next day to know what's going on. You can just go to your phone. So if that is the case, and we all are now changing in how we consume media, why would the publishers not be alive to that and change accordingly?
Well, I think one of the biggest issues that hasn't been mentioned is that of advertising. And the loss of advertising revenue coming in across digital platforms. So you've got this sort of tug of war between, you know, wanting to change with the times and build digital platforms and, you know, keep up to date with changing consumers' behavior. But at the same time, you've got the behavior of advertisers also changing. And there you're looking at also bringing in your big social media players who are dominating the digital advertising space, to the detriment of your local credible media. And so that is also a problem. The other issue that we deal with is that, you know, you can't, just because you're changing your media platforms and you're moving on to newer technologies, you can't ignore the fundamental basics of what media provides. And what we've seen recently, well, over the last few years, is that the quality of media seems to drop because media had to become more instantaneous. It had to become, you know, more fast-paced, lacking then the in-depth context and analysis. And you're actually seeing a rise in that coming back. You're seeing a wave of media going, we now know that we need to be producing media like this, but we're also needing to bring back the elements of what constitutes of quality media on a digital platform.
Well, now there are three issues that I've teased out, I've identified from what you are telling me, Thandi and Razia, that one is the cost of producing publications, two is the distribution, and three is the instant factor which digital media is able to deliver. So what do you do then when you are a publisher? What could be the problem or reason behind these high costs of printing and production of publications? Can't the publishers come together somehow and reduce those costs? Razia?
Yeah, it is unfortunately the worst place we are at in terms of costs and trying to struggle with the journalism. But ultimately, journalists have saved the country, and independent media houses have supplemented and support that role. It's a very important role to have, and it's something we can't lose. So that's why the IAB is a house or a board that helps put all of this, take all the problems and sit around with all the industry leaders and try and find a way to make sure that we don't lose print, we don't lose digital, and that we can adapt to social media in the most responsible way and find a way to speak to our consumers. I mean, ultimately, everybody's on social media, everyone's online, and people are buying the hard copy. We just have to find the way to bring it all together. Unfortunately, that's the part we're struggling with.
Well, and it's a business, as we said, and if you don't make money, then you'll not be able to run a sustainable business. But how does the future look like, Thandi, from your point of view, particularly for print media? What's going to happen down the line? Because people have definitely moved or continue to move away from reading newspapers and magazines.
I think that the newspaper industry or the print media industry, there are two issues there. Well, there are two waves or parts that I see it going. And the one is that there's still going to be a culture of people who want to read a newspaper. I think that's why we do still sell newspapers. You find that consumers who have access to digital and digital media are still buying newspapers. Yes, it's dropped significantly, but there is that consumer base still buying newspapers. The other one is that we have a big issue with internet access in our country. We have got a big issue with people accessing digital media. So yes, you're also seeing an increase, but you still have that. I think it's about 50-odd% internet penetration in the country. You still have a big chunk of our population that don't have access to digital media, that rely on then the radio, TV, and again, print. So I don't think you can completely ignore print media. I think that it still has its space, but we have to be innovative in how we are moving across to digital. And the future is digital. I think that's also, clear.
Well, Razia, can we have a final word from you?
Yeah.
Quick one.
Yeah, okay. So I think it's important for all media houses to take on digital on a serious role, take on social media like it's serious. I think an investment in all those platforms will help you advance just as fast and as much as that environment is taking. I mean, it's taking on the world. Google, Facebook, and Twitter. They're not stopping here. They're going to keep going. And we tend to hold us back in our investment and the way we approach things. So I think maybe take it a little bit more seriously.
Right.
But you still have the fundamentals of your print and your traditional media behind you.
Thank you very much, Razia van der Schuur, who's talking to us as part of the Independent Media Group and talking to us from Cape Town, and Thandi Smith. Thank you very much from Media Monitoring. We appreciate your time here.